The arm in the oven, the tragedy of a Tuscan village. The terrified scream of little Paolo echoed through the narrow cobblestone alley. The boy burst out of the red brick house of the Bianco family, crying and gasping for breath. In the oven, there's a human hand. The adults nearby were stunned, thinking he was joking. But the terror in the child's eyes was enough to shake the entire small Tuscan village. Just minutes later, groups of villagers rushed to the familiar house, the one that each morning gave off the smell of freshly baked bread. The kitchen door was wide open. Alessio Bianco, a 41-year-old baker, tall and thin, his white apron covered in flour, stood there, frozen like a statue. But instead of the scent of bread, the kitchen reeked of burning mixed with a sickening stench of rot. A horrifying mixture that made many cover their mouths, nearly vomiting. The wood-fired oven glowed red. A shriveled, charred hand jutted out from the ashes, its fingers curled as if still trying to grasp. Around the wrist was the familiar lavender bracelet, an item the entire village recognized, for it always belonged to Giovanna, Alessio's wife. No one doubted anymore. Paolo had told the truth. Screams and cries of horror rang out. A few men rushed in to drag Alessio away, but he did not resist. His eyes were dry, his gaze empty, as he uttered a single sentence in a flat tone, as if reciting a recipe. "This oven is not just for baking bread." In that moment, the peaceful village of only 46 households, once accustomed to church bells and the scent of ripening grapes, was transformed into a living hell. The local police were called immediately. Sirens wailed from afar, echoing against the cliffs, making the atmosphere even more terrifying. They cordoned off the scene, pushing villagers back, but no one left. The entire village gathered, eyes fixed on the Bianco house window, where the oven's flames still glowed red. An officer wearing gloves opened the oven and used steel tongs to pull out the rest. A half-burned arm, skin peeling, white bone exposed amid the ashes. The stench of burning spread, mixing with the screams of several women. "It's Giovanna! My God, it's Giovanna!" An old woman cried, covering her face as she collapsed. People remembered Giovanna, 35 years old, a cheerful woman known for her handmade bread with soft insides and crispy crusts. She had disappeared less than a week ago. Alessio explained to everyone. She went back to her hometown to care for her sick mother. Everyone believed him, since he still went to the market, still sold bread, still smiled politely. But now, in that oven, the charred arm with the lavender bracelet shattered all excuses. When the police handcuffed Alessio, he did not resist, did not curse. He only stood tall, eyes staring into emptiness, and repeated once more, like a final declaration, "Baking is an art. The ingredients, who forbids me to be creative?" That sentence made everyone's blood run cold. During the initial search, the police quickly discovered more details that left the villagers speechless. In the freezer, 2 black sacks containing cleaned bones. A large plastic bag inside long brown hair, matching Giovanna's. On the spice shelf, a glass jar labeled olio per crosta oil for brushing bread crust, but inside was human fat. On the kitchen table, the notebook lay open on the first page. Baking is an art, but who forbids us to be creative with new ingredients? The villagers panicked. Many whispered through tears, "The bread we've been eating these past days, could it be?" The vineyard-covered hills around the Tuscan village sank into a purple sunset that day, but the usual peace was gone. The church bell struck 6 p.m., and instead of peace, it rang like a death knell. Alessio Bianco, the baker once trusted, who made the whole village line up for bread, was now led away in handcuffs, leaving behind the stench of burnt flesh clinging to the red brick house. The whole village was left with one chilling question. How long have we been eating bread made by the hands of a monster? The village of Castelluccio, nestled on the Tuscan hillside, had only 46 households. Time moved slower here. The grape harvest painted everything red, and secrets rarely stayed hidden for more than a day. People knew each other by name, by the sound of footsteps, even by the smell of kitchen smoke. At the heart of the village, the Bianco's red brick house once filled the air with the scent of freshly baked bread. Every morning, Giovanna, 35 years old, was the soul of that kitchen. A woman with long brown hair, rosy cheeks, and laughter as bright as silver bells. She loved kneading dough by hand, patiently watching every minute until the crust turned golden and the inside fluffy. The whole village said, without Giovanna's bread, Castelluccio would lose its sunshine. Alessio Bianco, her husband, 41 years old, tall, thin, and quiet. He didn't smile much, wasn't as social as Giovanna, but everyone thought he was hard-working and diligent. People were used to seeing him push his bread cart to the market, used to his hunched figure listening to classical music in a small tavern on weekends. No one ever imagined that beneath that calm exterior lay a dark abyss. Last week, when Giovanna disappeared, the villagers only heard Alessio explain. She went back to her hometown to care for her sick mother, but no one had ever met Giovanna's mother, nor had anyone seen her leave, yet everyone stayed silent. Perhaps, in the small village, people trusted familiarity too much, to the point they dared not question it. The scandal shook all of Tuscany. The news spread like wildfire across dry fields. Headlines screamed, "The baker who turned his oven into hell." To prevent the case from being buried by local connections, the Naples Police Department sent a special investigator, Inspector Marco Ricci. Marco, 44, with a chiseled face and deep-set eyes, had handled many cases of domestic violence and serial killings in southern Italy. He was known not for his looks, but for his ability to see the shadow in words, the tiny contradictions that revealed the truth. For Marco, a forced smile could weigh as much as DNA evidence. On his first day in Castelluccio, Marco stepped out of the police car and took a deep breath. The air was heavy with ripe grapes, but underneath lay the smell of ash, of burning, of lingering dread. Before him, the Bianco's red brick house stood sealed off, silent like a criminal bowing its head. Marco met the villagers, pale faces, red-rimmed eyes. They recounted, every night after 10, the Bianco kitchen played classical music, mingled with solitary laughter. The night Giovanna disappeared, neighbors heard arguing, the crash of breaking glass, then silence. After that came a strange smell, rich and heavy, suffocating. They recalled Giovanna's dark-ringed eyes in her final days. She smiled, but her smile lacked life. Once, she even confided to Mrs. Serena, the vegetable seller, "The new oven is too hot. Hot like hellfire. But Alessio makes me use it every day." In his temporary office, inside an abandoned chapel, Marco spread the files across the old wooden table. On one side was Giovanna's photo, a gentle smile, flour-dusted white hands. On the other, Alessio's photo, eyes frozen cold as he was cuffed. Marco knew, to understand a killer, one had to step into his kitchen, to trace the stench of burnt blood, to look directly at what he considered ingredients. For the truth hidden in Castelluccio was not just a wife's murder. It could be the end of the village's peace, where a loaf of bread once symbolized warmth. Now it had become proof of cold-blooded cruelty. The Bianco kitchen, once scented with the warmth of sourdough, had now become a cold laboratory for forensic police. Wooden spice shelves were sealed. The wood-fired oven was locked. Every bloodstain, every strand of hair, every charred scrap of flesh was collected. An officer opened the large freezer, then immediately stepped back, face pale. Inside were 2 black nylon sacks filled with human bones, washed clean with lime, arranged neatly like a grotesque collection. Next to them, a large bag packed with long brown hair matching Giovanna's DNA. On the spice shelf, between jars of sea salt and rosemary, was a glass jar labeled oleo per crosta crust oil, but inside was a thick golden layer of human fat. A forensic officer shuddered. He turned corpses into seasoning. The blood-stained kitchen notebook, on its first page in slanted script. Baking is art, but who forbids us from creating with new ingredients? Marco Ricci stood silently before the wooden table, where the large knife still bore dried blood. He pulled on gloves, examining the handle closely. Alessio's fingerprints were clear. He didn't just kill, he arranged. Marco murmured. Police recovered an audio recording from the neighborhood surveillance system the night Giovanna vanished. The sound of arguing, a trembling female voice, a male voice snarling with rage. The crash of breaking glass, then suffocating silence. Right after, classical music began, Schubert's Ave Maria, slow and somber. In the interrogation room, Alessio Bianco sat upright, eyes half closed, as if daydreaming. Marco sat across from him, voice calm. You said Giovanna went back to care for her mother, but no one has ever met her mother, and in your freezer, there's her hair and bones. Alessio opened his eyes, lips curling slightly. I bake bread. I know ingredients. I don't distinguish flour, salt, or something else. As for the rest, someone must have made it up. Marco narrowed his eyes. Killers sometimes chose silence, but Alessio wanted to provoke. He treated the interrogation like a dialogue between chef and customer. DNA evidence from the charred skin in the oven matched Giovanna perfectly. In a loaf left on the kitchen shelf, police also found traces of human protein. The forensic report left the team stunned. Alessio had likely mixed his wife's remains into recent batches of bread. Marco tapped his pen lightly on the table. Do you realize? The one who once kneaded dough with you, who shared your dreams, is now dismembered in this very kitchen. You turned this house into a graveyard. Alessio opened his eyes, a flash of madness in them. She stood in my way. She wanted to leave, wanted to call the police. I couldn't lose everything, so I taught her a lesson. The pieces began to fit together. The seemingly model husband now revealed his true self, a delusional man, seeing the kitchen as his private kingdom, where he had the right to create with human life itself. But Marco knew this case didn't end with Giovanna's death. The way Alessio hid the body, cleaned the bones, and kept detailed notes in his journal, it was far too methodical for a first crime. The prime suspect was revealed, but in the shadows of Castelluccio, Marco sensed there was still another secret recipe yet to be uncovered. As the interrogation room door closed, Marco Ricci placed the laptop on the metal table. A crackling sound filled the air before the screen revealed dim yellow-lit footage. The shaky recording looked as if it had been captured by a hidden phone in the corner of the kitchen. On the screen, Giovanna appeared. Her hands and feet were bound with rope, her face contorted in pain. Her brown hair hung loose, her eyes full of terror. She struggled, trying to speak, but her mouth was stuffed with cloth. Alessio's shadow loomed behind her, a kitchen knife in hand. His voice echoed, chilling. You thought you could leave. No one escapes from here. Moments later, The video ended with a scream tearing through the air, then abruptly cut off. Marco stopped the clip, letting the silence press heavy over the room. He stared directly at Alessio, his gaze like a blade. "This is no misunderstanding. This is Giovanna, your wife, bound, threatened, in your very kitchen." Alessio closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, then gave a crooked smile. A smile no different from a crack on an old wall. She wanted to leave, wanted to expose me to the whole village. I couldn't let that happen. I made her understand. Her only place was inside the oven. Marco said nothing, just flipped the file and pulled out the new forensic results. "In the loaf on your kitchen shelf, we found Giovanna's DNA. You mixed your wife's flesh into the dough, didn't you?" Alessio opened his eyes, a mad gleam flashing. "People ate my bread, praised it. Who knew? Who dared to know?" He leaned back in his chair, sighing as if releasing a sweet secret. Marco kept his voice steady, though his hand clenched tight under the table. "Tell it all, every detail. That night, what did you do?" The air grew heavy. The wall clock ticked, counting down each beat. At last, Alessio spoke, his voice low as cooled ash. "That night, she argued with me. She wanted to leave, refused to cook. I didn't allow it. We struggled. She bit my hand, smashed a wine bottle. I lost my temper, grabbed her, forced her to the kitchen floor. Her head hit the stone counter hard. Blood spilled everywhere." He closed his eyes, as if replaying the scene. "I knew if I called an ambulance, everything would be exposed. I had no choice. I took the knife. I used to slaughter pigs at the abattoir. I knew exactly what to do to keep it clean." His voice was smooth, steady, as if describing a recipe. "I cut piece by piece, wrapped them in plastic bags, cleaned the bones, put them in sacks, and one part I kept tried mixing into the dough. No one noticed, no one suspected." Marco pressed. "Did you feel anything? Guilt, pain, remorse?" Alessio smirked faintly. "I am a baker. The smell of blood, the smell of burned flesh, just another ingredient. I still baked bread, still sold it to the customers. They ate, they praised. My art lived on." The confession froze the entire interrogation room. The young officers watching behind the monitor had to turn away. One whispered, "He's not human. He treated his wife like a pig in the slaughterhouse." Marco didn't yell, didn't slam the table. He only stared straight ahead and spoke slowly. "You think this is the first time you've done this? No. The way you cleaned the bones, the way you kept notes, far too methodical. Giovanna wasn't your only victim, was she?" Alessio stayed silent. Only the faint metallic sound of his fingers tapping on the table echoed. His eyes drifted to the side, as if seeing another kitchen, another oven, another victim. Marco realized they had just opened Pandora's box. Giovanna was only the beginning, and the truth behind it was far more terrifying. The news of Alessio confessing to killing Giovanna spread through Castelluccio like fire racing through dry straw. The once peaceful village was now drowning in fear. Villagers gathered around the stone well, staring at each other in horror. "We ate his bread. We praised it." Could it be that inside, the unfinished words made everyone shudder? Mrs. Serena, the owner of the vegetable shop, was called in by the police for questioning. She remembered clearly her last conversation with Giovanna. Just days before she disappeared, she said the new oven was too hot, so hot it felt like the fires of hell. But Alessio forced her to use it every day. She spoke with a smile, but her eyes were red. Another neighbor recounted, That night, close to midnight, they heard arguing from the Bianco house. Not loud, but drawn out, broken. Then came a heavy silence. After that, classical music began to play. Piano notes, soft yet chilling. And in the night breeze, there was a strange scent. Rich, fatty, but making everyone's stomach twist. Giovanna's best friend, Angela, from the town across the hill, burst into tears when she saw the lavender bracelet found in the oven. Giovanna never took it off. It was a keepsake from her mother. If the bracelet is still there, it means she never went anywhere at all. Angela also handed Marco the messages Giovanna had sent in her final month. "I'm so tired, Angela. Every day feels like being locked inside an oven. He's changed, cold, controlling every bite I eat, every hour I sleep. If anything happens, remember, I never wanted to leave this life." The messages read like a premonition, like an early farewell to a friend. Marco finished reading, his heart heavy. Giovanna had cried for help, but no one listened. During the background check, another crack appeared. 5 years ago, in Montepulciano, less than 40 kilometers from Castelluccio, there had been a strange disappearance. The victim was a young barmaid, last seen leaving the tavern with a tall, thin man with dark hair, whose appearance matched Alessio Bianco. The file at the time labeled him as a suspected boyfriend, but with no evidence, the case faded into obscurity. The local police never pursued it further because Alessio left town just a few months later, moving to Castelluccio to open a bakery with Giovanna. Marco cross-checked the timeline. It matched. Alessio had once worked in a slaughterhouse near Montepulciano, where he learned to carve animals with precision. Those skills he now applied to human beings. The villagers began to connect the dots of things they had once dismissed as trivial. Sometimes, Alessio disappeared for hours at night, returning with hands reeking of burnt ash. Once, a child said they saw him burying something behind the vineyard, but the adults waved it off. Many bought his bread, praising its strange aroma, though some later noticed a faint metallic temps after eating it. All those details, once ignored, now merged into a chilling picture. Alessio had not just killed Giovanna in a fit of rage. He had a history, a dark past that had never been unearthed. Marco Ricci sat in the temporary office, staring at the map spread wide. Red threads linked Castelluccio to Montepulciano, the bakery oven to the slaughterhouse, the lavender bracelet to the memories of the missing. He understood. Giovanna was only one victim in a long chain, and this truth did not just expose a wife killer, but also revealed society's helplessness, where small cries for help were swallowed by silence. Marco closed the file. He knew the most dangerous part was yet to come. Because once old secrets were unearthed, there would be echoes from the darkness trying to silence the truth once more. A week after Alessio's arrest, the Liege Forensic Lab sent back the analysis of food samples seized from the Bianco bakery. The results made everyone shudder. In at least 3 batches of frozen bread prepared for sale, traces of human protein were found, matching Giovanna's DNA. That meant Alessio had mixed his wife's remains into the bread and sold it. The news spread throughout Castelluccio. Villagers murmured in shock, many vomiting at the thought of the bread they had bought and once praised as strangely delicious. An old woman fainted remembering the weekend market, when she had fed her grandchild a piece of that different-tasting bread with her own hands. A haunting fear engulfed the small village. No more laughter at the great market, no more morning aroma from the bakery oven. Only the chilling dread remained. We ate one of our own. Marco Ricci attended a closed press briefing with the police department. He presented each piece of evidence. Human DNA in the bread gives confirmed the act of turning the victim into ingredients. Deleted video gives proved intent to detain and torture before killing. Kitchen diary gives detailed recipe notes, including the line, 50 grams red protein keeps the dough rich and fragrant. A young officer whispered, trembling, red protein, that means human flesh. The air grew heavy. Everyone felt chilled, as if breathing in the ashes from that deadly oven. But an even greater shock came next. On Alessio's phone, the tech team recovered a note file titled Reset Specially, Special Recipes. Inside, it listed dates spanning the past 5 years, each entry marked with a code. Bianchi menos 2018 menos Ceylons. Martina minus 2020. Dark flower. G 2022 menos lavender. Marco read the last line, his spine turning cold. The word lavender clearly referred to Giovanna with her lavender bracelet. But the other names, Bianchi, Martina, who were they? The police immediately cross-checked local missing persons records. Indeed, a woman named Bianchi had vanished in 2018. The case dismissed as left home voluntarily. In 2020, a young woman named Martina Gori disappeared after leaving work, never to be found. Both cases had occurred around Montepulciano, where Alessio had once worked at a slaughterhouse before moving to Castelluccio. Marco entered the interrogation room with new files. He slammed the papers onto the table, his voice tight and firm. Alessio, this is your list. Not just Giovanna, Bianchi, Martina, where are they? Alessio lifted his head. His eyes glimmered with a strange light, half pleasure, half pride. You read it. Reset specially. Yes, those are my finest recipes. No one in the village ever tasted them. Only I know the flavor of silence. Marco slammed the table. You killed them, then where did you hide the bodies? He tilted his head, laughing hoarsely. I baked them. Nothing preserves like fire. Ashes fly, bones crumble, all blended into the dough. Who could ever find them? The room fell silent. With those words, Alessio implied he had incinerated the previous victims' bodies, keeping only Giovanna, and this time, he wanted to create differently. The police never found the bodies of Bianchi or Martina. But the matching timelines, along with Alessio's grotesque description, were enough to strengthen the case. Giovanna was not the first victim. She was only the one who left evidence. The villagers were furious. From the square, shouts echoed, Treblig, monster. He doesn't deserve to be human. Newspapers called Alessio Bianco, Il Panettiere del Sangue, the blood baker. After many sleepless nights, Marco Ricci sat alone in the records room. He looked again at Giovanna's photos, her gentle smile, her bright eyes that once warmed the entire village. Then he turned to the photos of the missing women, Martina, Bianchi. Each face was a candle snuffed out, ignored until the fire of Bianco's oven erupted. He whispered, as if speaking to himself, "We've been silent too long, and that silence has fed the monster." Marco understood it was time for the case to end with a truly decisive sentence. To prevent evil from ever again mixing into the daily bread of these peaceful villagers. The trial of Alessio Bianco took place at the Siena Provincial Court, in the ancient stone hall that had witnessed centuries of life and death verdicts. Outside, hundreds of Castelluccio residents and people from nearby villages gathered, holding white candles. The flames trembled in the autumn wind, like burned souls demanding their voices back. When Alessio was led in, the courtroom filled with angry murmurs. He wore a grey prison uniform, his hair disheveled, his face gaunt. but his eyes still shone, the cold shine of a man who thought himself an artist. The prosecutor read the charges: premeditated murder, dismemberment and desecration of a corpse, concealment of evidence and possession of human body parts, and especially the aggravating circumstance of suspected additional victims whose bodies have never been found. Throughout the trial, Alessio was almost silent. Only once, when the defense attorney pleaded for leniency on grounds of losing control in a fit of rage, did he let out a dry laugh. The hollow sound echoed off the vaulted stone ceiling, sending shivers through the room. Lose control? No, I was perfectly lucid. I was only creating, and Giovanna was the final ingredient I needed. The courtroom erupted. Many shouted, calling him a monster. An elderly woman fainted. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. The final verdict rang out, each word like a hammer blow: death penalty. Although Italy had long abolished the death penalty. In this case, the court invoked international conventions on crimes against humanity and transferred the case to a special tribunal. The decision was seen as a message. Some atrocities go far beyond the boundaries of ordinary law. Alessio showed no reaction, no shouting, no pleading. He only sat upright, closed his eyes, and whispered softly, "In the oven, everything turns to ash, even me." After the trial, the village of Castelluccio held a memorial for Giovanna and the victims who were never found. In the square, in front of the old church, dozens of white loaves of bread were placed on a long table, but no one ate them. They were only there to honor a woman who had been turned into flour by a madman's hands. On Giovanna's simple gravestone, her family carved the words, "A small candle for the soul buried in the oven. Now you are silent no more." Angela, Giovanna's close friend, placed a purple lavender wreath by the grave. Its fragrance drifted in the wind, like a gentle reply from afar. Marco Ricci stood at the edge of the cemetery, his dark coat trembling in the wind. He quietly stared at the candle in his hand. In his tired eyes, a bitter truth was clear. Giovanna may have had her voice restored by justice, but the haunting would linger over the village for years to come. He turned to the crowd and said, his voice hoarse but resolute, "Evil doesn't arrive like thunder. It grows in the dark corners of silence." How many times did neighbors hear arguments, smell something strange, but chose to look away? How many times did a woman cry for help, only to be dismissed as a family matter? It was that silence that needed this loaf of blood. Marco placed the candle at Giovanna's grave and then turned away. Along the cobblestone path leading out of the village, the autumn wind howled. The red brick houses nestled on the hillside looked peaceful, as if no tragedy had ever struck. But beneath that calm, the villagers knew the memory of the blood baker would remain an unhealed scar, and somewhere in everyone's mind, a warning echoed. Monsters don't always snarl in the deep woods. Sometimes they stand right in your kitchen, disguised as family, carrying a warm loaf of bread. And only by speaking out can the fire be stopped from turning everything to ash.